Let me ask you something. Is it okay to have intimate relations with animals? No. If you're amongst the majority of people and would answer no to that question, and you think it is not okay to have intimate relations with animals, then let me ask you this. Why? Why do you think it's not okay? What exactly is wrong with it? Is it because it is just not natural? Is it because your religion says so? Now, I do want to point something out to you, bunch of gazebos. This is a very controversial topic that the YouTube algorithm gods probably won't like that much. In fact, I actually found it quite difficult to find an editor that was happy to work on this video with me. So please, if you think this is an interesting video, leave a like, leave a comment, and even share it with friends to keep the YouTube algorithm gods happy. All the best to you. Anyway, whilst I was locked in my dungeon making this video, I asked a few of my friends and family that very question. And apart from those that were deeply concerned about what I had gotten up to that weekend, I got a few thoughtful answers from people. One pointed out that the main reason for having relations is to procreate, to pass on our genes, or having babies. And seeing as though interspecies procreation is not possible, it would be purely for reasons of pleasure. To which I answered, so, if an animal is seen to be consenting and it is not being harmed, then is it okay? What would you say to that? Anyway, there are lots of reasons why people think it is not okay, and I'm not here to disagree with them. But you have to admit there are a lot of taboo things in this world that are seen as generally okay, or are at least accepted that they occur. So why is bestiality not? Okay, hear me out a second. Give me a moment to defend myself. I'll admit I never thought I'd ever be questioning whether having intimate relations with animals was morally wrong. But here I am, doing exactly that. Of course, bestiality is an extremely bizarre thing that happens, but the common arguments against it just don't sit well with me. And here's why. So, the controversial researcher that goes by the pseudonym Vera Benstow makes some quite compelling arguments. But before I genuinely sit here and make the case for bestiality, let's first dive into a bit of the background in our special segment, Hairy History Corner. Bestiality was documented in ancient Mesopotamian texts, where it was sometimes linked with fertility rituals and religious ceremonies. In some instances, temple prostitution involving animals was practiced as part of religious worship. They actually had animal prostitutes. That's right, they used to have animal prostitutes. Imagine that. Just like the thumbnail that sucked you into watching this video, a zoo that has been turned into a brothel. Genuinely, haha, imagine. Anyway, while not extensively documented, there are some references to bestiality in ancient Egyptian texts and art. Animals held significant religious importance in Egyptian mythology, and certain animal deities were revered and sometimes depicted in sexual contexts. I'm not having you on here, trust me, look it up. Bestiality was present in Greek mythology and literature, often in the context of gods or heroes, taking on animal forms or engaging in sexual encounters with animals. For example, Zeus was known for his numerous liaisons, some of which involved transformations into animals. Similar to Greece, bestiality was depicted in Roman literature and art, often with mythological or symbolic connotations. Romans inherited many beliefs and practices from Greek culture, and bestiality was sometimes associated with fertility rites and religious ceremonies. Ancient artwork from civilizations such as Greece and Rome occasionally depicted scenes of bestiality. These depictions ranged from mythological scenes involving gods or heroes to more mundane portrayals of everyday life. Such artwork served various purposes, including religious, aesthetic, and social commentary. Bestiality was also a theme in ancient literature, appearing in myths, poems, and plays. These literary representations reflected cultural attitudes towards sexuality, power, and taboo subjects. And let us not forget bestiality depictions in modern-day cartoons and pop culture. Take, for example, Roger Rabbit and Jessica Rabbit. Roger Rabbit is a rabbit, and Jessica Rabbit is a human. Yes, she's a human. She just took Roger's surname that was conveniently Rabbit. Nobody ever questioned that as immoral and taboo. And how about the classic Beauty and the Beast? They fell in love when Belle was a human, and the prince was still in beast form. Who knows what those two got up to behind closed doors before he was transformed back into his human form? Maybe she liked his big hairy body? Ha ha ha. However, in medieval Europe, bestiality was considered a serious crime, often punishable by death. During the Enlightenment period, there was a shift towards viewing bestiality as a sign of mental illness or moral depravity. Psychological explanations for bestiality vary, but some theories suggest it may result from a combination of factors, including deviant sexual arousal patterns, childhood trauma, or paraphilia. Paraphilia. Now that's a word you don't hear often. I could do a whole other video on this topic, so let me know if that's something you'd be interested in learning more about. Anyway, individuals who engage in bestiality may have difficulty forming intimate relationships with humans and may seek companionship or sexual gratification from animals. Philosophical perspectives on bestiality often revolve around questions of consent, harm, and the moral status of animals. Many ethical frameworks consider bestiality morally wrong due to animals' inability to provide informed consent and the potential for harm, both of which we will get to in a moment. Some argue that the prohibition of bestiality is based on a moral duty to protect animals from exploitation and harm. Also, something we will get onto in a moment. The legal status of bestiality varies widely around the world. In some countries, such as the United States and most of Europe, it is typically illegal and punishable by fines, imprisonment, or both. However, there are exceptions. For example, in some countries, bestiality may be legal if there is no evidence of harm to the animal. In Denmark, bestiality was legal until 2015, when it was banned following public outcry and pressure from animal rights activists. However, even after the ban, there have been debates about whether exceptions should be made if no harm is inflicted on the animal. Some proponents argue that consensual sexual acts between humans and animals should not be criminalized if they do not cause distress or harm to the animal. In Germany, bestiality was decriminalized in 1969, but legislation was amended in 2013 to make it illegal again. However, the law includes exceptions if there is no evidence of harm to the animal. This has sparked controversy and debate within the country about where to draw the line between acceptable and unacceptable sexual behavior involving animals. Countries with stricter animal welfare laws tend to have harsher penalties for bestiality. In the UK, bestiality is illegal under the Sexual Offences Act 2003, which prohibits sexual activity with animals. Offenders can face imprisonment for up to 2 years, as well as being banned from owning animals in the future. The UK has strict animal welfare laws aimed at protecting animals from harm and exploitation, and penalties for bestiality reflect this commitment to animal welfare. In Sweden, bestiality is also illegal under the Animal Welfare Act, which prohibits sexual acts with animals. Offenders can face fines and imprisonment for up to 2 years. Sweden has comprehensive animal welfare legislation and a strong commitment to animal rights, leading to strict penalties for bestiality. Accurate data on the prevalence of bestiality is difficult to obtain due to its taboo nature and underreporting. Bestiality occurs in various cultures and societies, but may be more prevalent in rural areas where people have closer contact with animals. It can also occur in urban areas, often in secret or underground communities. The animals involved in bestiality vary depending on cultural and individual preferences. Common animals involved include dogs, horses, sheep, pigs, and others, but virtually any animal could be involved in cases of bestiality. However, even if you are not into bestiality, you could probably guess which animals are not commonly involved in such acts. Okay, so that's all interesting stuff. Clearly, it is a controversial area that not everyone is in agreement with. But let us go back to Vera Benstow's arguments to see if they can change your mind and get you really thinking about why you think it is wrong or morally impermissible. First of all, I'm not sure whether there is a hidden meaning in this pseudonym, Vera Benstow, but I did notice it is an anagram for softer ban, which is exactly what this article is calling for, or at least advocating for, bestiality being morally permissible or decriminalized. Clever boy, ain't I? Vera challenges the commonly held belief that sexual activity between humans and animals is morally wrong in the research article that is titled "Zoophilia is Morally Permissible." The article was published in the Journal of Controversial Ideas, a journal that explores all kinds of controversial topics, which I'll be exploring more of in future videos. So you know what to do if you want to see more of those. Fira argues that zoophilia or bestiality is much like eating chocolate for breakfast. Well, they don't say that exactly, but the argument is that whilst it is not exactly conventional, it is not necessarily inherently harmful all the time. The arguments made in this article can be broken down into issues to do with. And remember those ethical arguments against bestiality that I introduced earlier? That's right, harm to animals and issues that relate to consent. First up is the argument of harm to animals. One of the reasons why bestiality may be considered wrong is that it causes unnecessary harm to animals. The author suggests that zoophilia does not necessarily harm all animals, and that some animals might actually get pleasure from copulating with humans, just like they might get pleasure from being stroked or receiving attention from a human. As we have already found, some well-developed countries have embedded in their laws that it must be proven that harm has come to those animals for it to be considered illegal. So clearly, there is some support that bestiality is actually morally permissible as long as the animal is not harmed. Now, of course, proving whether an animal has been either physically or mentally harmed is extremely difficult, but that may get easier with technological advances, especially AI. However, let's dig a little deeper into this argument that bestiality is wrong because it causes unnecessary harm to animals. Well, in today's society and the global system, the argument against something being morally permissible just because it causes harm to animals is actually not a common belief or social norm. So, in other words, what I'm saying here is, simply using the argument that it may cause harm to animals is not a strong enough justification to argue against something being morally permissible. I know, that was a mouthful. But hear me out for a second, will ya? Humans torture and murder literally hundreds of millions of farmed animals every day for animal products that are essentially used to fulfill human desires and pleasure. For example, the majority of farmed pigs are lowered into gas chambers and gassed to death with carbon dioxide gas that causes them significant suffering and pain, and can often lead to a slow and very uncomfortable death. There is a great documentary out now on Amazon Prime called Pignorant. So if you're interested in learning more about what actually happens to pigs, then I encourage you to go watch that. Anyway, there are so many examples just like this one, with other farmed animals living in squalor and awful situations, born into slavery and destined to be slaughtered long before their natural life cycle. So actually, having sex with a human doesn't sound like the worst case scenario for billions of animals. And so, the argument that bestiality is wrong, just because it causes harm to animals, has no moral justification in today's system. You can't willingly allow a system that kills trillions of animals every year, whilst also banning other acts because it may cause unnecessary harm to animals. It just doesn't make sense objectively. So, the next argument then, the issue of consent. The argument here is that animals can't give a thumbs up to sexual activity with humans due to the simple fact that they can't say yes or no. Some people even contest that animals do not have the ability to consent to anything, as consent is a human concept. And so, if an animal can consent, then they are a human. However, the author, Fira Benstow, counters this by suggesting that animals can give a pause up in their own way, according to most conceptions of consent. Just like a wild animal can give you consent to approach them or feed them if it feels like it trusts you. Even when a domesticated cat allows you to stroke them or pick them up for a cuddle, you know if it is consenting to you interacting with them, because if the cat doesn't want to be picked up, they will make a lot of noise and wriggle away, and maybe even scratch you. If an animal really doesn't want to do something, it will make its feelings known, and does not need to speak human to communicate their feelings. As humans, we have simplified the concept of consent to a simple yes or no, but we have evolved the ability to communicate with language. If we didn't have language, then do you think we would not be able to demonstrate whether we consent to something or not? We can clearly see evidence of animals not consenting to being killed in footage captured from inside abattoirs. So then, if an animal gets into bed with you and allows you to caress their private parts and doesn't protest in an animal-like way, then is there an argument to be had that that animal is actually consenting? Ultimately, Fira Benstow, or softer ban, concludes that zoophilia should be made legally permissible, which would entail decriminalising it where it is currently outlawed and fighting against the current wave of criminalisation. The author also argues that zoophilia or to be socially normalized based on the philosophical arguments they make in this article. Now, don't get me wrong, I am not about to go out and try to flirt with a bear anytime soon. But I do feel as though there is significant weight to these arguments, and I do think it is quite difficult to disagree with what this author is arguing. It makes sense in so many ways. If it is morally permissible in our society today to enslave billions of animals and kill them for our pleasure, and if we accept that animals can consent to things in their own way, then why is bestiality morally impermissible? I'd just like to finish this video by highlighting that, considering the trajectory of the move away from traditional identity politics, what might the future look like in terms of interspecies relationships? If we have more humans identifying as animals or a kind of human-animal hybrid, then will we also start to see a move towards a socially accepted bestiality culture? Now, to most people alive today, this might sound ridiculous, but really, think about it. It's possible, right? So, what do you think? Genuinely, I would love to hear what you all think as viewers. Also, this is a brand new channel, so if you do like this video, I'd appreciate you showing some support by liking and subscribing. I won't be asking you to subscribe in all my videos as I find it quite irritating sometimes. But this is my first proper video, so show some love. And also, be nice to each other in the comments below. And if you know anyone who you suspect is into zoophilia, maybe share this with them to see what they think.